The respiratory system of humans is composed of the conducting passages of the nose and throat area as well as the lungs in our thoracic cavity. And the major function of this system is to exchange the gases found in the atmosphere with those in our blood. Specifically, oxygen gas enters our airways with every inhalation, and CO2, the waste molecule of cellular respiration, leaves with each exhalation. And so we are constantly trying to supply our blood with oxygen and remove the accumulated CO2. Okay, so the respiratory system is arbitrarily divided into the upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract. You can see the upper respiratory tract here, which if we consider a parcel of air that is inhaled, we want to trace a path through this tract. And so it would first enter through the openings, the nostrils, the openings to our nasal cavity. And once this parcel of air is in the nasal cavity, it's warmed to body temperature, it's humidified with moisture, and it's also been filtered through cilia and the hair in our nasal cavity to remove any foreign particles. That parcel of air continues on down the back of our throat, which is called the pharynx, a common area where food will also mix. And then we'll enter the respiratory system through the glottis, this opening to what is the larynx, the final portion of the upper respiratory tract. Now the larynx consists of the voice box. The voice box contains the vocal folds, which are also called the vocal cords. And of course, air passing through these vocal cords vibrates them, gives rise to our voice. The lower respiratory tract consists of the stiffened wide passage, the trachea, and that trachea is stiffened by a number of rings of cartilage surrounding it, which makes it different from the anterior portion, the larynx, which was just soft tissue, no cartilage in there. Okay, so then the trachea go on to split up between the right and the left bronchus, collectively called the bronchi, or the plural term, so that the parcel of air we're following is going to pass into the bronchi, which dive into the lungs properly, and that parcel of air will then continue on down finer and finer passages that get smaller and smaller. These are the bronchioles. And those bronchioles branch out like the roots of a tree throughout the lungs and end in these terminal large air sacs called alveoli. And these are the functional part of the respiratory system. And we're going to take a much closer look at those. So what you see here is these expanded sacs of air, sort of these groups of circular structures at the end of the bronchioles called alveoli. Now the reason the alveoli are shaped like this and covered with blood capillaries is because they are the portion that's responsible for the actual exchange of gases between the respiratory system and the circulatory system. So you can see here this cutaway of an alveolar sac, a collection of alveoli. You just see this hollow space where the inhaled gases are finally going to accumulate. Now if we take a look at a singular alveolus, one of these singular circular sacs, we can see that each of these alveoli get a blood capillary over them. And remember that that inhaled air that's filling the alveolar sac in here has a relatively higher oxygen concentration than the blood that's going to be pumped across it. Recall that the blood here is from the body and has dumped off all of its oxygen and picked up a whole bunch of carbon dioxide. So here we have low O2 and high CO2 in the bloodstream. The air inside the alveoli is high in O2 and low in carbon dioxide, and that produces a concentration gradient. So as the blood passes over this capillary bed, it will pick up oxygen and dump off the CO2 back into the alveolar space, because those chemicals are just following their own concentration gradient. It's nothing but simple diffusion. So if we take a look at a cross-section of lung tissue under the microscope, what I want you to start to be able to make out are here's some of those alveoli. You see those rounded sacs. All of the reddish tissue in there is the blood capillaries that are surrounding those alveoli laid over their cells. So you can see that there is a large number of these alveoli and that they're round, and that those two things combined create a lot of surface area for gas exchange. Compare that to a cross-section of lung tissue that's affected by severe emphysema. Emphysema is simply the breakdown of alveolar walls, either by smoking or some kind of a disease. When you break down alveolar walls, you suddenly get much fewer and much larger alveoli. Now, when you compare these two next to each other, you can easily see how the amount of surface area for gas exchange is much reduced in the emphysetic tissue, which is going to lead to a lower efficiency and trouble breathing.